سلام كمي توعلو كمي تمسيو خبركم من خبركن تخطاتلتي مدباتنا نلوم خا نقال منستر وصاي قدايات إرترا منستر عثمان صالح أما بل 79 وعلى حبرات هاجرات نزوسمو عمدره نإذن بزطعم ترجمنا نباهم نبلو مكتتالكم نعدم زخبركا بريسيدنت مبل 79 وعلى ودب حبرات هاجرات أتو فيلمان يانغ زخبركا أنطونيو غوتيريز وانا صحفي ودب حبرات هاجرات زخبركم زخبركن لعلوت لوخات منغستاتن هاجراتن زخبركا بريزيدنت نتوم قدمي زصنحو سعيبه مرحي مبل 79 وعلى حبرات هاجرات بريزيدنت كوينكا ممراصكا انقا حغوسكا يبل زينا لومي وعلى ابقرانا منغدي مسغغار علماوي قصراوي سرعاتيو زكايد زلو قمينا بتقند زعباي متاوي ندحريت قرب ملسيله لتاريخاوي اطمامتا حبرات هاجرات كدهسس قدم حدا زمن اب صباح قداماي كينات عالم اب طري 1920 كمسرت كله علماوي سلامن رغاتن نمسفان زلعل اعلامان طموحن زنبريو ودب حبرات هاجرات يخون امبر زي كمتم استبقسولهم علاماتاتن مدباتن ننتبي كالاي كينات عالم كغت ايكالن دحر 25 عامتات اب تقمتي 1945 دما እንደገና ውድብ حبرات هاجرات كال كينات عالم نخيغوانفن وحس علماو سلامن مرغغان مرغغاص عليمو تمسريتو بدحر زون محبرسب عالم نابا كراخري كلتا قزراوي زحل كينات ياتيو مس كله اب لعل علماوي سلامن رغاتن زصعبو هاسيان مغداتن كا دحري 45 عامتات نمبتتان سوفيت حبرت تخطيلو اب 1991 تزازيمو نعو سعيبو زمص دما انكو قصراوي سرعاتي از دما زغدل عنوت زختله نتي اب زمنه جيلانتن مغزاتتاتن زنبره بستحدث ملكعو زمزمزه زمني نبحرياو صغاتاتن هابتن هاجرات بحيلن بخال استفلالي منغدي زمزمزه سرعاتي متكلاتن بوليساتن از انكو قصراو سرعات كا درتان مغتاين كوينو اب كم بعل اوروبا حلف دغافن تطابقن بمخان كره كله اب يوكرين دما بزغدد ملكعو زترايو اتي ناي مغتاين مدراتن بوليسات دما نچاينا اب اسيا اب تغبرو نطفتاتن سراحتن نمغتا زترايو እዚ ድማ ንዓለማዊ ሰላም ባዕሉታ ዝጸልዩ كما أكال إذا بوليس دما أبزوبانا أبلعلي فلسطيناويان استجبروا أبلعلي فلسطيناويان كينات بمخفات كاب جزاء مريتهم كروحكم مجبارن إذا خا زعابي عقرقر أبتزوبا إن دفترن نابزبا أسر زوبا وكينات كعبي زي سجيني كم زعينتناي من عابن عقرقرن أبستفال على هجرات أفريقيا بمفتار نناي مجزاتاون جلاون متتثواتهم يوحسو اب كم بعل دوب امريكا دما حدست سرعتات نمتكال يتقوملو بزحات اكلات اب اوروبا امريكان دما انصار زستفلالي استفناچل لفنتي حزباو تقاومن كسمعا ترايني اذن كالن استفلالي وشطاو تقاومتا دما ننفتات عبود بوليسي انكو قصراو سرعات زمهمنن كان زي سرح اقوليحو زرايني زخبركم من زخبركنن نزي عندران نسو زسعبو نوصن مقوام زفسسو حيلن صعرن بجزاء رسوم اخلات علامه وي طموح ايكونن مخنياتو خا زياتهم نت زدل سلامن رغاتن كوحسو زخلوم قرصن زچبط منغدن سلازيبلو سلامن رغاتن قدم خونتنا عبيتن بلصغنا ناب رسو مخانو لعل باهقي دك سبات نفتحن بوليتيكاوي نصحريان ونيم بخلا أبهاهلا علماوي بوليتيكاوي عبللا متلال مسجداد مقبعبع مرساين ببحاتن بزخونة يخون أكل زتصورن زدقفن أيكونن زد ما بهزبتات علم ما بزحلف 100 عامتات اندان تصريو متيو مجمريا بمحبر هاجرات ليج اوف نيشنز دحيرو دما بودب حبرات هاجرات اتي زدن صحتهم بار اذ بهاجي هزبتات علم نسلام كرغاغص كيلو دويو اتقنع ملسين بار ايتخالن بخلا زراربا اتي رؤي ودقت تسفا مقراصن طراي زيكونه ازيز ترابحن زعابين فصامين بقليلو تمليسو نابتي كفلما استحلن علامه كبصح قليل زي مخانيم زخبركمن زخبركنن حجي نابتي ناي حزب ኤርትራ ጸገምን ጸበባን ተመሊሰ ከም ሩይ ኣብነት ናይ ብዙሓት ህዝብታትን መከረኦምን ከም ምዃኑ መጠን ክዝርዝር ኣፍቅዱለይ ሰለስተ ወለዶታት ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ብሰንክቲ ኣሕዋት ዳላስ ብራዘርስ ኤርትራን ስትራቴጂካዊ ረብሓታት ኣሜሪካ ኣይተገልግልን እያ ብምባል ዝወሰንዎ ውሳነ ን80 ዓመታት ብድሕሪ ካልኣይ ኩናት ዓለም ኤርትራ ዋጋ ክትከፍል ተገዲዳ እያ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ን50 ዓመታት ብፖለቲካውን ብረታውን ቃልሲ ንናጽነት ተቓሊሱ እዩ ንነዊሕ ዓመታት ብድሕሪ ዝውን እንተኾነ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ናጽነቱ ኣብ 1991 ምስተጓናጸፈ ዓቕሙን ጸዓቱን ሃገሩ ኣብ ምህናጽ ከየውዕሎ ዝተፈላለዩ ማሕልኻታት እዮም ጎኒፎሞ ዶባትን ካልእን እንዳመኻነኻ ተመሳሳሊ ናይ ዕብለላን ዓመፅን ፖሊሲታት እዩ ኣብ ልዕሊኡ ጸኒዑ እዚ ኸኣ ኣዝዩ ዓብዪ ቁጠባውን ካልእን ውድቀት ምስዓቡ ብዝኾነ መለክዒታት ክረአ ይከኣል ብድሕሪ ዝውን ብዘይ ሓላፍነታዊ ኣገባብ ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራን ህዝቢ ኤርትራን ሰህሮ ብዘይብሉ ተጻብኦታት ተኻይዱ ከም መንጽሩ ድማ ኣብ 2009 ዝኾነ መርትዖ ወይ ጭብጢ ዘይብሉ እገዳ ተወሲኑ እዚ ኸኣ ንህዝቢ ኤርትራ ክቐጽዕን ኣስሓኮ ብዘይብሉ ምስምሳትን ነቲ ንዓሰርተታት ዓመታት ንናጽነትን ኣንጻር ዓመፅን ዕብለላን ዝተቓለሰ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ንምቕጻዕ እዩ ተፈቲኑ እቲ እገዳ ኣብ 2018 እኳ እንተተላዕለ እቲ ሕቶ ግን ስለምንታይ ኣቐዲሙ ጸኒዑ ተወሲኑን እዩ እቲ ክፍለጥ ዘለዎ እምበኣር ኣብ ኣእምሮ እቶም በይናውያን ዘይሕጋውን እገዳ ዘጽንዑ ከንቱ ናይ ምሲጣን ሃቐነን ዘመተታትን ዘስዓቦ እዩ እዚ ኸኣ ክሳብ ሕጂ ኣብቲ ዞባ ዘይርግኡነት ክፈጥር ክኢሉ ኣሎ ዝኸበርኩምን ዝኸበርክንን እዚ ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራ ዝተኻየደ ካብ ባሕሪ ብጭልፋ እዩ ኣብ ካልኦት ሃገራት ኣፍሪቃ ደቡብ ኣሜሪካ ኤስያ ኤውሮጳን ዝተፈጸመ ስቓይን መከራን ደረት የብሉን ስለዚ ኸኣ ንበይናዊ እገዳታት ኣብ ልዕሊ ኤርትራ ዚምባብዌ ቬንዙዌላ ኪባን ዝጸንዐ እገዳታት ክለዓል ንጽውዕ ከምኡውን ንኣስታት 60 ዓመታት ኣብ ልዕሊ ኪባ ንዝተስገደደ እገዳን ዘይፍትሓዊ ንኪባ ከም መዋሊት ናይ ግብረ ሽበራ ጌርካ መቕማጥን ክለዓል ንጽውዕ ከምኡውን ኣብ ቻርተር ውድብ ሕብራት ሃገራት ከም መሰረታዊ መትከላት ሰፊሩ ንዘሎ ኣንጻር ሕጊ ጫካ ንዝምጉት ሰነድ ምርኩስ ጌርና እዞም ናይ ዕብለላ ሓይልታት ነቲ ሕጊ ከም ዝረገጽዎ ብምዝኽኻር ተራን ትርጉምን እቲ መትከላት ደኣ እንታይ እዩ ኢልና ክንሓትት ንደሊ እዚ ሓቅነ ዘነጽሮ እምበኣር ንህጹጽነትን ኣድላይነትን ህዝቢ ዓለም ኣንጻር ዓመፅ ንኽቃለስ ዘረዲ እዩ ብዝለዓለ ወንን ሓቦን ስምረትን ካብ ዝሓለፈ 100 ዓመታት ንላዕሊ ብምቅላስ ዝሓሸ ዓለማዊ ሰላምን ርግኣትን ንምውሓስ ክቃለስ ኣለዎ እዚ ሱኢልካ ክሕለፍ ዘለዎ ርእይቶ ኣይኮነን እሞ እቶም ናይ ዕብለላን ዓመፅን ሓይልታት እውን ኣብ ልዕሊ ሕግን ደቂ ሰባትን ዝገበርዎ ገበን ተሓታትነት ክስከሙ ይግባእ ኣብ መወዳእታ ንህልው ጻዕርታትና ዓወት እንዳተመነኹ የመስግነኩም ዝኸበርኩም ተኸታተልቲ መደብና እዚ ክትከታተልዎ ዝጸናሕኩም ሚኒስትር ወጻኢ ጉዳያት ኤርትራ ሚኒስትር ዑስማን ሳልሕ ኣብ መበል 79 ዋዕላ ሕቡራት ሃገራት ንዘስምዖ መደረ እዩ ስለ ምክትታልኩም ኣዝና ነመስግን ብሩኽ ምሸት
Your Excellency Philemon Yang, President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Honorable Heads of Delegation, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, allow me to join previous speakers to congratulate Your Excellency for your election to the presidency of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The current session is taking place at a crucial juncture of transition in the architecture of global governance. Before delving into the main subject, allow me to digress a bit and dwell on some historical perspectives. As it will be recalled, maintenance of global peace was indeed the overarching mantra and proclaimed objective when the League of Nations was established 1 century ago in January 1920 in the immediate aftermath of the First World War. But in spite of the lofty pronounced objectives, the League of Nations could not fully measure up to the noble task and deter the eruption of the Second World War 25 years later, in October 1945, the United Nations was solemnly established to prevent another world war and guarantee durable global peace, but it again, our global community was plunged into the era of the Cold War, whose hallmark was a controversial bipolar international world order. With all its dynamics and the deleterious consequences to global peace and stability, the Cold War era culminated after 45 years in 1991 in the collapse of the former Soviet bloc. As it happened, this later phase ushered in a new precarious epoch of the unipolar world order, which was in essence bereft of any new ideology. As a matter of fact, the new dispensation represented a retrograde relapse to and revival of centuries-old colonialism and slavery, indeed the resources and wealth of others were usurped to mollify the insatiable greed of the few through force and other tools of repression. The manifestations of this policy are myriad and include pronounced policies of containment by the architects and proponents of a unipolar world order in the European theater, and especially reckless acts in Ukraine. Provocative containment policies against China pursued in Asia for analogous objectives and considerations. Trends that these policies portend to global peace. In our neighborhood, the ramifications of this policy include the perilous war unleashed to stifle the Palestinian cause and evict them from their land, the commotion that it continues to engender, and the wider regional conflagration that it may trigger. Acts of subversion conducted and multiple crises fomented in several parts in Africa under various pretexts to preserve and maintain colonial slavery. Overt interventions carried out in the same manner in Latin America to install surrogate regimes. Various subterfuges conducted to stifle and roll back bargaining public protests in Europe and the United States against the backdrop of fragmentation of traditional coalitions. All these distressing developments and trends amplify the innate flaws and dysfunctionality of the reckless policies of the unipolar world order. Ladies and gentlemen, efforts exerted during the various epochs to imbue institutional structure and mandate to the global architecture were not ultimate aims and objectives in themselves. As it is indeed palpable, institutional formats are mere mechanisms and modalities for achieving the desired goals and objectives. Peace and stability constitute indispensable prerequisites for the promotion of prosperity and growth and the attainment of the ultimate human aspirations of justice and the prevalence of a just political order. In other words, the assertion and guarantee of a just global order where domination, deceit, coercion, and intimidation, plunder, and monopolization are not countenanced or tolerated. The unequivocal aspiration of the peoples of the world in the past 100 years were precisely the crystallization through the League of Nations and later the United Nations of a just global order. The perplexing question remains whether these lofty aspirations and profound wishes were achieved? The pregnant answer is no. These have not been realized. On the other hand, the logical corollary to failure is not despondency, but redoubled and more vigorous commitment and resilience in order to achieve the cherished objectives and goals. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to revert to the predicament of the Eritrean people, which epitomizes in all respects the typical ordeal of numerous other peoples. 3 generations of Eritreans were doomed to pay precious and inordinately huge sacrifices for almost 80 years since the end of the Second World War, merely because the Dallas brothers determined that Eritrea does not serve United States strategic interests. As it happened, the people of Eritrea were compelled to wage political and armed struggle of liberation for 50 long years. And even when they achieved their hard-won independence in 1991, they were denied respite and the opportunity to funnel their energies for nation building. Indeed, the same hegemonic policy, consideration, and defunct ploys were ramped up to foment unremitting crisis and instability by instigating border conflicts and other ruses. The suffering and the economic damage that was inculcated, the opportunity loss incurred, have been enormous by any standards. Still, and in the face of unwarranted onslaught, the resilience of the Eritrean people was not dampened, and yet the spiral of mindless hostility continued to intensify without let up. In 2009, Eritrea was subjected to sanctions on the basis of unsubstantiated and trumped up charges. As it happened, the forces of hegemony plotted to further punish the people of Eritrea and invoked a preposterous pretext for a people and the countries that have waged a relentless struggle against terrorism and domination for decades. The sanctions were ultimately lifted in 2018, but the question remains, why was it imposed in the first place? Furthermore, it must be borne in mind that illicit unilateral sanctions, futile demonization campaigns, as well as subversive acts to instigate conflicts in the region still continue unabated. Ladies and gentlemen, the ordeals meted out to the people of Eritrea is only the tip of the iceberg. The tribulations imposed on other peoples in Africa, Latin America, Asia, Europe, and the Americas are severe indeed. In the event, we urge for the categorical lifting of the unilateral coercive measures and sanctions imposed on countries like Eritrea, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Cuba, imposed including the 60 years long embargo against Cuba and its unjust placement on the dubious list of state sponsors of terrorism. Meanwhile, we need to pause and ask what is the relevance and impact of the fundamental principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter against the backdrop of the law of the jungle that the hegemonic powers are bent on imposing. This precarious reality amplifies the imperative and urgency for the peoples of the world to strive with higher vigor, fortitude, and enhanced solidarity than what has transpired for 100 years, to install a global order that guarantees peace and stability. This is not an opinion that can be left to circumstances, The forces of hegemony must also be made accountable for their crimes for the dispensation of justice. Let me conclude my brief address by reiterating our best wishes for success in our current endeavors. I thank you.